I'm super excited. Ladies and gentlemen, the Amber Andrew.
Here I am.
I got to think. So I was thinking about, I even texted you earlier today, like where I could find your bio. And thank you so much for, texting me it. But the reason I did that is you have worn so many different hats for so long. And which is why I'm excited for the conversation. So I feel like it's part of my introduction and my,
question asking.
Yeah, excitement for it. Because for everybody listening, I've known, how long have I known you? 15 years probably, maybe longer.
Yeah, high school. Right out of high school, 2012 or something.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And I have watched you, I've watched you hustle. And it's been fun because you're a mover and a shaker, and I've seen you wear so many different hats. So I'm going to call you a serial entrepreneur. Yeah. You're also, though, you're a homeschool mom. Mm-hmm. You're a wife. You're a community leader, real estate investor, serial entrepreneur, CEO. I mean, whatever hat it is of the day, or multiple at the same
hats
time.
In a day.
Yeah, which is why I'm so excited because I think. Gosh, I was thinking through too, just some of the past side hustles or businesses that you've had running, and at any given time, I feel like there's multiple of them. I mean, there's been marketing agencies, mm-hmm. there's been property management companies, mm-hmm. there's been the event planning side mm-hmm. of things, there's been...
And funny enough, we don't even event plan anymore, which we can get into.
Yeah. So it's been cool though to see. I've just watched you always kind of be an entrepreneur, and it was before my entrepreneurship mm-hmm. days. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, so it's fun because now I have both sides of the perspective for me. I've seen your continuation of it, and now I've got a new appreciation of it. Yeah. So that's where I want to start I was going to jokingly ask, have you ever had a job? But no.
I was actually going to say, I think it might be 15 years since I've had a LinkedIn profile. So when you asked for a bio, I was like, where would someone even put a bio?
Yeah, where do I go for that?
I don't even know what you would use that for. My brother and I were just joking, really, what do people use LinkedIn for? Because that's just not at all fit on my radar. Last time I had a job wasn't that long ago, though. I had a job right before my daughter was born, so 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So along the way to jobs.
Yeah,
normal
for sure.
Jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Normal jobs.
Which is even, so that's where I want to start is, and I know that your dad's an entrepreneur, your dad's mm-hmm. a business owner too, but I want to hear, because it seems to me like that was for most people, there's kind of a normal progression. We go to school, we get a job, we learn some stuff, and then, eventually have the courage to break out on our own or whatever. I feel like you kind of skipped those in-between ones and just went out on your own. No? Okay.
No.
Because that's where I want to start is walk me through kind of this entrepreneurship mindset and where it all started and kind of where it came from. I want to hear the beginning days of it.
Yeah. So my dad did start his own business. He owns a business processing credit cards. And so I always was watching him have control over his schedule, and so I always appreciated that. Though I will say my dad, without fail, sits down at his desk from 9 to 5 every single day, at 9 a.m. So probably not the millennial version of being an entrepreneur, but he definitely always worked for himself. He really hustled. So I did see that, but I don't think I ever had that idea to do that when I grew up. I always wanted to be a 4th grade teacher since I was in 3rd grade.
No way.
That was my big vision, was to be a teacher. And I told everyone that. I was an overachiever in high school. I loved school. I was class president. I was on the first Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission and got to support the city council. And everyone was like, you're going to be in government, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm going to be a teacher. So I went into college, and my first semester of college, I switched to being a communications major. And everyone was shocked because my whole life I had said I would be a teacher. And but I just took one communications class and fell in love with it. I really liked looking back, I think I probably liked the psychology behind my communication classes of the psychology of selling, the psychology of personal relationships and of public relations. And so I loved college, I actually went to Westmont College in Santa Barbara, and then I transferred to University of Colorado, Denver. And then my last 2 years, I actually finished online, again, coming back to this control my own schedule thing. I loved the idea of not having to go somewhere. And then right out of college, I did start down the entrepreneur track. So that's when we probably connected the most. I had a digital marketing agency, which is a joke looking at all your stuff. But my agency was called A-Frame Communications, and it was right when social media first became not first became available, but first became available for businesses.
I was going to say a marketing tool.
Yes,
yeah.
It was the first thing. It was a marketing tool, and I charged $250 per business per month, and we did like a post. I don't know if it was a post a day, but I think it might have been a post a week for $250, and we did all the content creation and we did all the copywriting. It was me and like one other employees, and in about 6 months, I went from 0 to 20 like clients, and so we're managing 20 social media accounts, and I hated it. I like really didn't like it. I was like, man, I hate being an entrepreneur. I hate having my own business. I hate not seeing people. I hate doing this by myself. And so
what made you make that initial decision though? So you graduated college, and then is there a moment when like you're deciding what to do next?
I think that people just go, you know, hey, could you run my social media? I'm like, sure, let's Google. This is how I've done everything in my life. I just Google, hey, what does it cost to run someone's social media? $250 sounds good. I'll charge you $250. And then a second person asks, and I know this looking back now. I love systems and scaling. I'm really good at it. And so I loved the idea of like, oh, I could write a contract and I could use the same exact contract and I could use the same exact packages and invoices. So I scaled up really quick because that's, looking back now, I know that that's the part I love. At the time, it's just what I did, and I, you know, scaled really quick.
Right.
And I would like, you know, email people. I mean, it's funny because it never felt like cold emailing. I knew a lot of people at the time, and I would just email them and say, hey, I'm doing social media. It's $250 a month. You want to be a client? They'd be like, sure.
What did that feel like? So right out of college, and it sounds like, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but it sounds like there was kind of accidental entrepreneur is not the right word, but the demand preceded the plan.
Like that's been my whole life.
People ask, you figured out a way to fill it. Then all of a sudden it turns into a thing. And before you know it, you're this young digital agency owner, and you've got multiple clients and an employee. Mm-hmm. I want to know what that chapter felt like. Like, were you... was it scary? Was it exciting? Was it fun? Did you realize what was happening, or was it all kind of happening quickly?
I don't think I could have told you this at the time, but looking back, I think that the reason I really love being an entrepreneur is having that control over my time, and then I didn't. I had to always be on my phone. I had to be keeping up with the marketing trends. If I wasn't actually creating a post, I was researching for posts. We did a ton of market research, which you know, so we're studying competitors and what are they doing, and especially because social media marketing was so new. So we're like, what do yoga companies even do in this space, right. You know? So it was a lot of computer time, which is funny because I do computer stuff now. So to me, it felt like I'm always on my screen. I'm always having to be on my phone. There's always 20 people needing something. And I think there's a really high turnover in the marketing world because people don't want to spend money to make money. And so they spend money and then it's not working right away. And so they go find a different marketing agency. And a lot of times it's not because they're not happy with you. It's just because, you know, they didn't give it enough time, or, I mean, you could talk about this all day. But I didn't like that high turnover. I'm like too much of a people pleaser. So it felt like a constant disappointment. Like it was very... stressful to always we had to do monthly reports, and it was very, very stressful to me to keep the numbers up. If we weren't growing in followers and we weren't growing in engagement, and having that from 20 different sites was really overwhelming. And was the stress coming from that you were trying to like build a business, or that you were trying to keep people happy? I thought that it was building a business, which is why I had my whole foray into getting jobs, because I thought, oh, this is what it's like to be an entrepreneur, to be needed all the time, to have clients calling you, to have clients turnover. And I was like, I actually don't want to be an entrepreneur. And I went from that to working for a digital marketing agency. Interesting. So I was like, I just thought, okay, I don't like this. Well, you know, fast forward, we could talk about me working at an agency. I loved it. I ended up getting fired. Shout out to the agency who fired me. I actually really would love to go back and talk to them. They actually, when they fired me, said, in a couple years, you're going to want to ask us questions. Come back and ask us questions. So I have that on my calendar. Yeah. But turns out I hated marketing. Not entrepreneurship. And it took me a long time to figure that out. That's an interesting thing, because I talk with entrepreneurs all the time. I mean, as you know, that's what I do all the time at my job, is I'm talking to entrepreneurs. My podcast is probably half entrepreneurs. And there's, I think, and this is not like science or anything, but there's kind of like two categories of people. There's somebody who's really good at a thing,
and then they turn that into a business. Or there's somebody who's good at business and then, or kind of have that more entrepreneurship thing.
Oh, I joke all the time. I like wedding planning. I'm good at it, but I could go pick anything.
But it's
not
business.
anything, but I could pick a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I've learned now that it's the systems. I love, especially the past couple years, building a team, coaching a team, curating our office space, curating what our culture is going to look like. Systemizing, scaling. I would rather do that part and I actually pulled myself out of planning this year.
How did you learn that you didn't like marketing, but you liked entrepreneurship? Walk me through that kind of like.
Yeah, good question.
That epiphany. How was that? How did you learn that?
So I went to work for a marketing agency called Bold Brew. They're kind of operating in a smaller scale now, I think. Local couple, I really hope Amanda listens to this. Hindsight 2020, looking back, they were struggling with all the things that I now struggle with. What does hiring look like? How do I charge the client enough to pay someone what they're worth, but also manage their time and also make a profit, and all the things. And they were always being like, do you like this system? Do you like this? Do you want to change that? What about this? And now I remember as an employee being like, why are they always changing things? Why are they always growing things? Why? Like, I could not understand that. And looking back, I'm like, I know exactly where they were at. But it was a small agency. We had like 8, but it fluctuated, but 4 to 8 people internally. I worked in the natural food department and got to go to like natural food conferences. It was really fun. So I only had 3 or 4 clients myself, and we were like a pretty full-fledged agency. So we were doing copy consulting, all their content creation for all their socials, a lot of brand work as well. So I really liked that. But then we had like a whirlwind of personal life events, and I don't think that the firing coincided with the life of, was because of the life events, but it happened at the same time.
Similar time frame.
My husband had a really serious accident, and his story to tell, but in like a matter of moments, he broke both legs and had a whole legal portion, and he had, we lost a car and he lost his job. And then 48 hours later, I got fired from our marketing agency.
48 hours?
It was literally 48 hours. I was like, my husband hadn't even been like back to the hospital to like evaluate how broken his legs were.
And didn't you have
And we had a newborn. So yeah, we had
Yeah.
Grayson, I think, was like 1.5 years, almost 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a newborn. I was working at this agency. My husband has this accident. He was working for the sheriff's department at the time. So we both had pretty decent jobs with pretty flexible in the way that like we could, he had half the week off. So we'd switch off working and all those things. And then everything changed overnight. I lost my job. Our church ended up closing. We actually were evacuated when my son was born for the 416 fire.
This was all the same year?
It was within the same year. So we were evacuated, and then we had, so my husband's accident, so wait. Evacuation, we have a baby. Our church closes. My husband's accident.
Loses his job.
I lose my job, and then the mudslides happen.
Yeah.
So we had, after the fire happened, the fire really was like right behind our house, and our house was fine. We actually were evacuated when I went into labor. I was at 40 weeks pregnant. So we were evacuated when I was 40 weeks pregnant. We got back in our house while I was still in the hospital. And so it was just kind of like crazy time. And then we had these mudslides that came down and just destroyed. They moved our cars. So they just destroyed our whole entire property of the house we owned. And so it was kind of just like a crazy time. Lost my job. Well, then COVID happens. My husband goes back to start a cafe and restaurant with his family, and so he is now moved into the restaurant industry, and then COVID happens and shuts down all the restaurants. Of course.
Gosh.
And in between there, I like went to work for a dyslexic camp as like a dyslexic tutor and got trained to teach dyslexic kids to read. So there was definitely this like in between time where I was like, okay, maybe I will go back to teaching.
Right.
That seems like a great option. And I'm helping with the restaurant, and then COVID closes the restaurants, and I get the most crazy call. Amanda, my old boss who fired me, she calls she referred me to this girl. She's a local, I would say serial entrepreneur, but I go to work for her as her personal assistant. And I really loved it. And I thought it was definitely like this huge opportunity. She was paying me great. She was an artist, but she was also doing a lot of work with COVID and connecting people with the community and community resources. So we were doing like on one side doing work with the local community, and my local connections were really helping. And then on the other side, we were working in her business, which was selling. She was a really profitable photographer, but she did like fine art photography, not portraits. And I got fired again. We like go on a walk, and she's like, I thought you could build a whole Shopify website, but it turns out you can't. And I was like, that was never on my resume. I'm like, I can figure it out. I've taken a Shopify class. I can edit a site, but I'm not a web developer. That I've never claimed to be. So I get fired from that, and I go to work for my dad. And he always wanted us to take over the business. He's like ready to be out. He's been ready to be out for about 10 years, and it's a very profitable business, but I worked for him for about 2 years. And so that was my foray of jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, there in the middle.
Come back to that chapter. That seems like a critical, that was, I don't know if that's a year or how long, but.
Yeah, it was probably 3 or 4.
The new kids, the loss of the jobs,
yeah.
The accident, the injuries, I remember that chapter.
Yeah.
I even took we went ice fishing.
I know, I remember you. And we were like reaching, and we just talked so much about that whole season. We were blown away by every little thing. It doesn't matter if it was I'm going to cry if I talk about it too much, but taking our son ice fishing, there was people who came and walked our dog. We were literally reaching out. I distinctly remember, and our neighbor has since passed away, but I remember him walking over and delivering a quiche, and he left it on top of my car. And we just were so blown away by the support of our community and people we knew and didn't know. And so we're really big about, taking people quiches.
Yeah, right.
And taking their kids ice fishing. Right. I think I've babysat four different couples' kids this week for Valentine's Day. Because
you've experienced how impactful it is.
Yes, that's of no consequence to me for you to take another kid ice fishing or whatever. We had a great time. Yeah, I can't imagine that was for sure.
But so I want to unpack the transition from there. So. Because so many people, obviously right now we're talking to a fun, excited, confident, there's all this positivity coming from you, and I can feel your energy. I have to imagine though that chapter was not, sunshine and rainbows. And I want to know kind of the story you told yourself, or the mindset that you guys were in, or those family dinner conversations because literally your whole world, between the house, the fire, the new kid, the 2 jobs, literally all of it. You know what I mean? Talk about coming it down. Because I got less perspective into the transition afterwards. You and your family, rightfully so. No, everyone did. But I'm curious, the conversations you and your husband had, and kind of the story you guys were telling yourself about what was next, and how you came from there to the next chapter. Walk me through that.
So we had everything from, we can't afford to live in this town, we need to move, and we drove all over the country looking for places to move. We had, do we try to keep going with the restaurant thing, except we hated it. We can talk about restaurants if you want. It's the one business I'll never be a part of. It was one part a conversation about the job, but it was also a conversation about, is this actually the life we need to live? Kind of doing this Durango tango hustling in this town.
Because I would imagine that it sort of forced that, self-reflection, because you've got to make some decisions.
Yeah, we have to do something. It's not working. At this point, we're in we were renting our basement, and so our first property we managed was downstairs. For a little bit here, and this was maybe our first foray into entrepreneurship. I don't know. I think it was just we needed the income, and we also just thought it'd be fun. We went on this long trip, and on our trip, we decided, we had these conversations, and we decided we were going to put up glamping tents in our yard. My parents had this teepee, and we were having really good success renting out our basement. It was a separate basement apartment. It was paying our mortgage. You guys should read not anything I say, but I'm sure I can find you some books on house hacking. Everyone should do it. It was like changed our life. The mortgage was paying our rent, but it was also really helping with our taxes. That like changed the tax game for us. And so we were loving that, and we're like, let's put some tents in our yard. And so we put one tent up, and it probably cost about, I'm like full transparency, probably cost us about $20,000. It was a really low startup because we owned the teepee, but we put a lot of money into like the furniture, etc. My husband did excavation to level the spots. And the first year we turned like over 40. We're like, this is crazy. We paid for like this whole thing in
right in a year. Yeah.
So we're like, let's put up another one. So then we put up 2 or 3 more. And so the next summer we had 2 the whole year, and then we had a third for part of the season. And we ended up buying a camper, traveling around, and we actually rented out our camper as well for a portion. So at one point we had 5 Airbnb listings, and it wasn't making us like a ton of money, but it was like enough to be like, this is kind of fun, this is cool. Who knew you could like make money? We like literally off your phone, you're like responding to Airbnb. I don't really call it passive, but it's like you can do it with your kids sitting there.
It's at least flexible.
Yeah, flexible. So
I remember, so my first, it's funny because when I look back on,
I know you guys do real estate too.
Yeah,
you get addicted to like the new booking $250 or whatever.
There's nothing better when and that's what I was gonna say. So when I look back on in hindsight, I was born to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
it took me a little bit longer to like realize that dream, but I used to rent my parents' VHS tapes from their garage when I was a kid. I had a trash can cleaning business.
Oh, awesome.
When I look back, I'm like, oh yeah. But as an adult, I got involved in an online ticketing company, and I was a minor partner. I invested in and whatever. But at the time, it was huge for me. I wrote a big check and did the thing, and we built these websites that would sell tickets, and then we would charge a ticket fee on it. And I'll never forget like that. It changed my perspective of everything because I'm like, oh my gosh. Every time somebody buys a ticket, we get $1.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, what?
And then we'd like sit there, and then you talk about the conversations. We would sit there and be like, okay, like, so it's Memorial Day weekend, and all 5 places are filled up, and you're only renting the teepee for $100 a night, but you're sitting there going like, this is nuts. We're making like $800 in a night.
It's crazy, right?
And like, yeah, we have to clean those tomorrow, and I have to find someone to clean. I have to buy the cleaning supplies and the sheets and all the things. But that was really cool to just be solely responsible for the.
I wonder if that's what makes entrepreneurship addicting, because it was almost like
it's definitely a dopamine hit.
Yeah, because my first experience, it was almost. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's almost like I created money. Like it was like that you could find these ways, find these opportunities to add value. I mean, it's all very like improving somebody else's life.
That's the other thing that's addicting is there's a feedback loop. Either people are booking more or you're having
and if they're booking
reviews.
more, it's because they like it.
Yeah, so there's like that feedback I really really liked, and so. In that way, we never got bad reviews. So in that way, it was better than me owning a marketing agency because I was getting so much negative feedback. Probably because I wasn't very good at it.
Negative feedback in a marketing agency? What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
That doesn't exist.
So fun. I was like, this is great. I'm getting all 5-star reviews. The 4 stars are kind of funny because they're like, oh yeah, spider crawled across the open camping tent. I'm sorry, I can't control that. We had one of our cats at the time, and we got rid of him right after this. We gave him to my mother-in-law, but our cats took live mice into people's beds in the glamping tents.
Oh gosh!
And so we had some nice calls in the middle of the night, like, "Hey," they were so sweet. They were like, "Hey, these really sweet cats, we love them, but they're bringing live mice into
a little bit of a problem.
Our bed." I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was horrified. But by and large, people really liked it, and we found out we were good at it, and so we loved that. I say we got shut down by the county. They didn't do anything besides tell us we should probably stop.
Right.
We're in like a residential. It's not a neighborhood, but we're next to other houses, and we're having 5 different people, and we're like renting porta potties for the restaurant.
Turns into a lot.
We were running a commercial. Looking at the time, even we were like, yeah, it was only a matter of time, but we learned so much, and I think. I don't know. Everyone always says the difference between people who did and people who do. What is that saying?
The ones that did
actually did it.
Yeah.
Like that's like my whole life philosophy.
And
like you just do the thing. And so we just, the other thing too is people say when you're doing real estate, you're supposed to evaluate X amount of deals all the time, the people who are really into it analyze like 20 deals a week. My husband and I do that with business ideas. And so we are always coming up with all kinds of stuff. We had probably our longest conversation, believe it or not, was about axe throwing business. And it was going to be a trailer. We're going to take it to events, rent it out for bachelor parties. And just going through, when you're analyzing real estate, you're doing a basic like P&L of real estate. That's probably not the right term for it. But when you're doing a business, you're basically making a business plan.
Right.
Who am I hiring? What are my problems? Who am I selling to? And we just every date night, we sit and talk about at dinner. We still do this.
Yeah.
Like, who's the target audience? How many of them are there? Is this actually going to be money? Is it enough money to make it worth it? And I think I saw you have a copy of the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. The biggest thing that book did for me is remind me that if you're going to do something, it's going to take 10 times more effort than you think it is. And that's really helped when thinking about ideas. Because we sit here and go, okay, do we like this idea enough to do 10 times more effort than we think? Yeah. And oftentimes we get through 4 or 5 date nights of talking about the same idea, and we have really solid numbers, and we know who we're going to hire, and we know who we're going to sell to, and we go, nope, we don't like this idea to do 10 times that.
Too much work, yeah.
And now that we've run so many businesses, I'm like, it is so much work. So you better really like the business you do.
Do you think that's a misconception? Because, you even mentioned, like, control my own schedule, and, like, there's kind of, like, the glamorized
for sure.
entrepreneurship.
But I also think people always say, oh, being an entrepreneur is so hard. And I think it scares people away from actually just doing the thing.
Do you think it's easier than people think or harder than people think? Generally speaking, being an entrepreneur.
I think for people who are natural born entrepreneurs and have the mindset of not making excuses and being positive and not burning bridges and the things that make a really good entrepreneur, I think it's actually easier than they think. I know so many people that actually have that skill set, but they're so scared by people being like, you're going to work an 80-hour work week and you're never going to see your kids and you're going to not make money for the first 5 years. Any of those might be true, but I think it actually is not. I mean, I still spend time with my kids, and so do you. And so you can actually do it. But I think for people who actually think it's going to be easy or want a shortcut or don't like to talk to people who are probably not going to be good entrepreneurs anyway, it probably is harder.
Yeah, because there's definitely it's different because you have to be willing to do more for less.
Like when I say something's going to be 10 times harder than you think, does that scare you away? No, because you run ultras.
Right.
So when I like...
Well, compared to entrepreneurship, running ultras is easy. No.
But I just feel like if that's not going to scare you away, then it probably is easier than you think.
Right. Yeah, and I think so much of it is just having the courage to stick with it. I mean, I honestly think so much of it's consistency.
Oh, for sure.
Like just keeping the doors open.
Yes. And doing things.
Solving today's problem.
Especially marketing.
And then tomorrow's problem.
There's some people businesses that aren't quite that bad, but
are there?
Where they just yes.
Tell me. No, I'm kidding.
I'm like, you guys have a certain pain threshold.
Yeah. It's this high.
Yeah.
It makes running ultras seem easy.
Yeah, I mean, most people, they own businesses and the marketing's the worst part. That's all you do.
That's why you hire an agency, No, it's been interesting though too. That's been a good thing for me. Now that I wear the business owner hat, my ability to work with business owners has gone up a ton.
Yeah.
So it's actually been a really good thing because, I sold digital marketing for 11 years before I went on my own.
I can imagine it's a lot easier.
And now I have a whole different perspective, and I'm able to have those. I can have the better conversations of like, no, look, I get it. You know,
actually,
I got to do the same thing here. So it's kind of like
for sure.
It's helped with that dynamic.
So how I got out of having a job. Here's the other thing I'll say about the mindset portion. Everyone says like all the not biohacking, but like business life hacking. People say get up early and whatever, all the things you should do. I think the biggest thing that is true that people say you should do is reading. I think that my husband has a book a week goal. I actually read books. He listens to them. And so I probably do something like 20 to 30 a year instead of 50 to 60. But I think that the mindset shift that comes from reading. And yes, getting up early and working out and all the other things people say to, get your life together. But for us, I think it really happened with the expanding our vocabulary, I guess is the best way to say
tell me more about that. Do you think
let's just use an example. So you read Grant Cardone's 10X and now I have that vocabulary that when
when the hard times
parenting
come,
is 10 times harder than I
Right.
thought it would be. Or we're deciding whether to homeschool our kids or send them to school. Well, part of that, Choose Your Hard, which I got from a different book I read.
Yeah.
And part of that is either way is probably going to be 10 times harder than we think. So which one of those are we going to be willing to like take the 10 times harder for? And so I think giving you the language, but also just and tools.
Yeah.
Where you're stuck and then you're needing the tools. And I will caution people if you're like, I don't even know where to start with what book to read. I would try to be really careful with reading books that are actually what you're struggling with and where you're at, because I think you can get really overwhelmed, especially because today we have podcasts, we have books, we've got YouTube. I love YouTube. I would almost rather watch YouTube than listen to a podcast. But I think there's so much information. You're like, I don't even know where to start. Do I start with getting up at 5 and working out, or do I start by just sitting down at my computer and working in my zone of genius, or whatever people say? And I think looking back, and what I'm getting really good at now is, we can talk about this, but where I'm at right now is, what do I need to do to build team culture and grow and scale and delegate? And I need to be reading books about that and not necessarily. And I think I was getting a little bogged down in, I love Scaling Up. I think it's a great book. But I was reading it when I was starting my business. What a dumb time to read Scaling Up. I was filled with all these ideas and maybe
like
it helped
ahead.
me.
Yeah.
Yes, I was like a whole chapter ahead, which I get, but if you're potty training your kids, read the potty training books instead of the teenage books.
Right.
Like we try to do that in business where we're
and I think that's the other thing too, is I think a lot of people, I read it somewhere, that people drastically overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and drastically underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. Mm-hmm. So like our perception of the time horizons and whatever, and so a lot of times I think people get discouraged because it's not moving as fast as they think. Mm-hmm. But if they would just stick with it, they'll be further than they thought eventually. You know what I mean, with enough time. And I think probably some of that comes from the you're a $1 million agency and you're reading how to be a $20 million agency.
For sure.
You got to be a $5 million agency first.
And I mean, some of that really helped with the mindset part. So I'm not saying, and if you don't know where to start, just pick up a book.
So do you think do you think the benefit to reading that quantity of books is the actual tactics that you're learning, like the actual content of the books, or the practice of it?
I think Nate's taught me that the volume of different perspectives is really helpful. And so I am the type of person that if I read a book, I come out of the book with a to-do list. And he really challenged me, read the book and don't make a to-do list.
Just read it.
Just read it. And so then when you need something in the future, or I just read Cody Sanchez's new book about buying businesses. It's really good. I'm not looking to buy a business right now. So I could have sat there and been like, here's all the different things I'm going to do to my business if I ever want to sell. And I could have made the to-do list. And he's really the volume he listens to him at, he's like, oh, I never thought of reading books like that.
Do you only read what I would call those self-help, but self-development books?
Oh, no, I read all kinds of stuff.
What do you read other than business books? Are you reading novels?
I read fantasy.
Do you?
I read most of my volume of books. I probably read over 100 books a year. Most of my volume of books is I'm really into children's literature, not necessarily picture books, but novels. So I'm reading through the Caldecott and Newbery Honor books.
Interesting.
And part of that is I loved reading that as in high school. That's what I've always liked to read. It's kind of a newfound thing because now that I have kids that I'm homeschooling. So maybe that's part of it, but I've just really enjoyed the literature part of it.
Right.
It's good stories. I just read Mountain Born, which is a Newbery Honor book. It's just this story of this shepherd who goes up in the mountains and he gets attacked by wolves and he's 8 years old, and I'm sitting here going my 6-year-old could never go in the mountains and take care of sheep. And so I read that stuff too.
Talk to me about that, the balance of being a serial entrepreneur and a mom, and not only a mom but a homeschool mom. I mean, all those different hats. Do you at times ever feel how do you determine where you're giving your priority in terms of time and energy, whether it's the businesses and entrepreneurship or your kids and your responsibility as a mom? How do you balance that?
This might not be helpful for everyone, but I found that I could never be one of those people who have a business that they're working while their kids are there. I can't do that. I feel like I I feel like I'm not doing my kids justice and I'm not doing my business justice. And so there's been times where I've been like, oh yeah, I'll reply to emails, and it feels so wrong to me. I'm like, I don't even like, we don't have a TV in our house. My kids don't have screens. I'm like, I don't even like the idea of me sitting on my computer in front of my kids. So that was really, so when I finally realized, like, wait a second, I just need to divide these, that's been super helpful, because then I can just say, this is my work, and I can give myself up to 100% when I'm at work. And then when I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. And it took a little bit to get to, like, never having to reply to an email, but now, I mean, I homeschool my kids on Mondays and Wednesdays, and my employees know I'm at school all day, and I have one free hour that I respond to as many emails as I can really quick. And then, on days like today, I took the kids from school, and Nate doesn't normally have them today, but he has them for the afternoon. And so that's been really helpful for me. I had a huge argument with my mom a couple weeks ago, because she's like, you can't give 100% everywhere. And her theory was, you have to divide your percentages, which I think is what you're asking. Like, how do you divide your time? Which technically, if you're dividing your time, there is percentages. And I really thought about it for days after, because I don't know why, it was so triggering. It made me so mad that she was like, it just seems like you're trying to give 100% everywhere. And it made me so mad, and it took me days to figure out why. And I finally came to the conclusion, like, wait a second, I actually do want to give 100% everywhere. And so my big thing is, if I'm here podcasting, I'm here podcasting, and I'm giving 100%. And when I'm home with my kids and I'm homeschooling, I'm there 100% giving my kids 100%. And so I had to go back to her and be like, okay, well, here, what do you think about this? And she's like, yeah, but that still seems exhausting. And I think...
Is it?
No, because to me, giving 100% is what I can give that day. So it's not always going to be like what my hypothetical best self is.
We're not
I'm not like always 100% perfect mom. I'm not saying you have to give a perfect 10 out of 10. What I am saying, though, is like
be present in the
being present. That's really helped me, is to say, when I'm homeschooling, like, what's the best I can do with what I have and the time constraints I have, because I have lots of homeschool friend moms that's their full-time job.
Right.
And I'm not ever going to be able to do that, because I like working and I love my job and I love my employees, and I'm not going to give that up. So, I just try not to compare myself to that, and I try not to compare myself to people who send their kids to school and I can't wrap my head around what a dream it would be to have 40 hours a week to give my business. Yeah. Like, that would just be so cool. But it would also be so cool to have 40 hours a week to give my kids. And I just don't have either of those, and so it's helped me a lot to say, like, okay, well, it's not like I'm giving 80% of my time to my kids and 20 to my business. I'm giving 100% of what I have to give whenever I show up.
When your mom asked you that question or made that statement of the 100% or whatever, was it coming from a place that she felt like you were doing too much or too little, or?
She always has an idea that I'm doing too much.
Too much?
She is a stay-at-home mom, and I think she never had that expectation of me, so I'm not saying that. But I have hard days just like everyone. So my mom has this thing where she doesn't like to see her kids in pain.
Right.
And so when I'm having a hard day and just want to vent, it turns into like, let's try to you're doing too much. When in reality, I feel like I could be doing too little, and I still have bad days.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna like get emotional and be overwhelmed, and whether
every human being.
Yeah. So I'm
curious though. Sometimes I think my mom thinks I do too much. That's what especially when I'm running, especially if I run a 100-miler. But and I love my mom to death.
Well, and it sounds crazy to people when you're like, oh yeah. I stayed my day yesterday. I stayed up till midnight painting my new office to my door to my office. So I'm like up till midnight. I get up at 5. I'm like prepping for the kids' school. I go to co-op for 6 hours. I am subbing someone's history class. I'm teaching my own reading class. We had a Valentine's Day party, so I had to bring sour cream for the baked potatoes and the cheese crackers for the trail mix bar. And then, I have my hour of emails in there. And then I leave there, and I had a Valentine's Day party that I do remember Valentine's for after. And then I come back, and I we manage venues, so I had to do the financial reports when I got home. So we stayed up again, and I got the final P&L and the balance sheet and everything sent out. And that seems crazy. And it is crazy. That's not super sustainable. But also, it's such a stupid quote, but I reread it lately, and I was like, that's me. You know that quote that says, you're not doing too much, you're doing too little of what you love?
Right.
It's so cheesy. It's like someone put it on like a barn or something. But I have discovered that about myself. It has actually been really important in our marriage for me to realize that's not how my husband works. Like if he's doing too much, he's actually doing too much.
Right.
And we need to scale back. But if I start getting overwhelmed and frustrated, it's not ever because I'm too busy. It's because I feel like what I was saying about I'm not giving 100% in these areas.
Right.
And
or you're too busy doing the things you don't care enough about.
Yes. Yeah. Where I'm like, wait, I didn't even have time to put my kids to bed. That's important to me. That's when I start getting overwhelmed. It's not that I had a full day.
Yeah.
It's that. And so I've gotten, actually, since I've figured that out, I have to be careful because I can't like add a Christmas party, which gives me life but drains my husband. So if he's feeling overwhelmed, like I have to be careful. But I've really learned. Yes, he's very much an introvert.
And you clearly are an introvert.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's actually made me more introverted, and I do need my home time. But it's actually been a really good tool to say, okay, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed. I actually probably do need to plan a party.
Like a thing for you, yeah.
Or like plan something. Like I need to go if I get stuck at home.
Do you think, like when you're looking back, especially considering the fact that your mom, had a different life. I mean, the stay-at-home stuff, which is great. I mean, no negativity there whatsoever. But I'm curious, I'm curious if you've ever been able to identify where this drive has come from you. Like if it is. Here's for example, I've learned, and some of it's good and some of it's bad about myself. I've learned that I do really well with external validation.
Mm-hmm. Me too. It's an Enneagram thing.
Which is I wish I needed less of that.
Yeah.
Like I very often I'll even tell my wife, like Nicole, you know her. I'll say, like, man, sometimes I wish that I could be satisfied with a different level of what I would consider to be success. Mm-hmm. Like, but
that's an entrepreneur thing. We wouldn't do that.
But do you think that ever you're at risk? Like, because sometimes I think I flirt with it. That I'm at risk of. I think it's destination, syndrome or whatever. But where like, I'm like, okay, the next thing, the next goal, the next milestone or whatever. But then you look back, and I've been very intentional about it, and it's helped me a lot. That I've taken the time to stop and say, look what I've built. Like, look what I've done. Like, we really do have it so good. Like, I was talking to Nicole on Monday. We're driving up from the race on Arizona, and I was stressing because I was falling behind on work. Emails were kind of piling up and whatever. And I'm like, hold on. How cool is this?
Yeah.
It's a Monday. We're driving,
For sure.
We're coming up from Arizona.
Your kids are watching
with the
whole
family.
Thing.
I'm going to catch up with, in and out. So I had to do this, like, intentional check of, like, I have it so freaking good. I have it so good. So I'm curious though from you. Anyway, all of that to say, I'm learning the things that drive me. Some of which are healthy, some of which are unhealthy, and like balancing them. Yeah. I'm curious because you're clearly extremely driven, and I'm curious if you've been able to identify some of that of like where that drive comes from, and if you're able to sometimes tap into it, or sometimes if it's too much, or any of that.
It's cheesy, but the mindset helps. I really think it does. So I think that's a big step. I think, and I'll encourage you in this. I think if you see it and you notice that about yourself, I don't think you have to worry about it as much.
Interesting. Just because you're aware of it.
Yeah, because you're aware of it now, and you're like, okay, at least I almost feel like if you see that in yourself and you're like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I feel like I'm not satisfied with what I have and I need more. And just even seeing that,
I like that.
Fine. Like, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, for sure.
It can be, but the fact that you're seeing it and acknowledging it means that like you likely will catch yourself, especially because I've heard you tell that to other people on your podcast. Someone else is probably going to be like, okay, Ben, it's getting out of hand. You're big enough now.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? The other thing too, and I just feel like I'm learning this now, there are seasons, and this is the first time in our business that I don't feel like I'm in growth mode. It's the first time I'm in which is crazy for me. And that's an intentional choice.
Are you okay with that?
No, it's not forever. I think that's an intentional choice. But so after I got fired, I decided, after all that whole series, this is a crazy story. Working for my dad, I hate it. It's nothing to do with my dad. I just have zero passion for the job. I don't like marketing. That was the role I was in. Like, I was like, I hated marketing then, but I was doing it for cool natural food companies, and now I really hate marketing now that I'm doing credit card processing. And I just really did not like it. And I told my dad I'd stay for 2 years. We're like just past a year. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a whole year in front of me. And I get this call from a realtor in town that won't be named. This realtor in town calls me and is like, hey, this one time 3 years ago, we went to coffee and you said Nate and you want to own a venue. That's totally normal in conversations now because we manage venues. At the time, that's probably the only person besides Nate I've ever told in my whole life that I wanted to own and manage a venue. Like, ever. My family, I've never said that to anyone ever. And this is the only time I've ever been to the coffee with this guy. He's not like a friend. He's like an acquaintance. I casually mentioned that in one coffee date 3 years before. He calls me. He goes, I'm selling this wedding venue. And the owners are from Austin, and they don't want to run it, but they have 30 weddings on the books this is September of 2021. He's like, we have 30 weddings from September 1st in 2021, I think it was September 9th, through the end of the year. And I'm like, okay, that seems dumb. Why would you take over 30 weddings if you aren't local and you have no idea how to run a wedding? I'm like, okay, whatever. He's like, will you come up and look at this venue? We want to talk to you about partnering. We go up. It's the old Silver Pick building. We walk through the building, and Nate and I are like, this building is shit. It's falling apart. The business is falling apart. Everything about this is terrible. Of course, the Salzier restaurant's there, and everyone, if you talk to them locally, has beautiful memories of having dinner at the Salzier. And so there's definitely some redeemable parts. But they send us the financials, and I'm like, this business is in the negative. There's nothing good about this business. They're like, the chef's going to stay on. They're doing all the catering. They're like, everything. They're like, and we're talking to the chef, and the chef's like, yeah, right. No, I'm quitting tomorrow. Everything we look, we're like, this is the dumbest purchase ever. So what we do, and I don't know if Jamie and Mary Claire, our business partners, are going to listen to this, but what we do is just pitch them really high. We're like, okay, this is just such a mess. And I was like, okay, we'll execute. I'm like, what else are they going to do? We'll execute your weddings from now until the end of the year for X dollars per wedding. And it was an absurd number. Like, it's more than we charge now. And we'll manage the catering. We'll do all the things. And we get on a call with the realtor and these people, and 15 minutes later, we did this call. We're like, and we can talk about this in a second too, but we are living in this barn, which is this like project we took on, which was
a whole
crazy.
Other thing. Yeah.
We're like living in this barn. We don't have anywhere to video. We live in a one room like barn, and our kids are in there. So we put our kids in front of our laptop TV, and we do this video call presentation on my back porch. And they call us, not kidding you, 15 minutes later, like, yeah, we're good. They signed the contract, and we're contracted to do 30 weddings in 3 months.
And they're like, now what?
And I'm like, okay, so I'm working full time for my dad, and I execute all these 30 weddings. And somewhere in here, I sent a text out to all my friends, and I go, I just need someone to come to my office. And at this time, my husband had made our, it used to be a meat locker, shed in our yard, into this, super adorable, he's like a magician, super adorable little office. And when we took over these 30 weddings, they handed me a stack of folders. Here's the weddings. And some of them had last names, and some of them didn't, and some of them had phone numbers, and some of them didn't, and some of them had email addresses. Some of them didn't even have dates. And I'm like, these weddings could be tomorrow. I have no idea. And we're supposed to be doing the catering. Some of them have coordination. Some of them are staying. There's a huge lodging component because we sleep 46 people in the building. And I'm like, okay. And then everything just keeps piling up because they want us to make them a website, and they want us to start them an Instagram, and we're doing a name change, a brand rebrand, and all this stuff on top of it. And I just send this text out to all my friends. I go, do you guys know any college kids who can just come sit next to me that I can just say, okay, do this, this, type all these folders into this things. I just need someone to be a second person. One of my acquaintance friends that I texted to was like, can I come do that? And she's worked for us ever since.
No way.
She's literally like my biggest supporter. I text her 100 times a day. And she started then and helped me work through this mountain of paperwork. And what that did is within 6 months, that allowed us, because we had, after we executed those 30 weddings, the owners came to us and said, actually, would you like to just sign on long term and manage all of our events?
Right.
Because they were looking for a kind of a shorter term partnership. And we said, sure. They're like, will you run the restaurant? We're like, no. And they're like, well, great. Will you close the restaurant? So Nate charged them a whole lot of money to close their restaurant. And then he had to get rid of the food and fire the employees. And it was that's a whole story in and of itself.
A whole thing, yeah.
We had to execute all those catering contracts, so Nate had to come up and call them and finalize the menus and do the food ordering, and we had to cater all these people's events. And they're like, will you run the lodging? Because you have property management experience. And we're like, yeah, sure, we'll do the lodging. And so we re-signed the contract. We signed a 10-year contract with them. And that really gave us the opportunity of, this won't quite sustain us now. It was 100% commission. So we didn't make any upfront money on anything. So we had this money that, like, I'm working full time for my dad, and we also have this chunk of money because we just worked 30 weddings.
Right.
So we're like, okay, how long can we float not working? I'm not kidding when I say 100% commission. And so we're coming up on, like, we did this in January, February, and then March, April, May, nothing happens.
Right.
In any business in this town, especially in the events and lodging business. So, we did 100% commission, and it just turned into a long-term 10-year thing. And that allowed me, because we had that full-time, just hope of income. It wasn't even really income. That allowed me to quit with my dad, and then that allowed us to pour more energy into the not at the lodge weddings, because now I'm focusing 24/7, not 24/7, but whenever I'm working on this wedding business. And so it basically allowed us to scale up from I was doing 3 or 4 weddings a year on the side while I was working for my dad, and that kind of allowed us to scale up. First year we're doing 5 or 6 offsite and 15 to 20 on-site, and then the next year we're doing more and more and more, and I can't believe it's 2025. We already have 53 on the books.
How cool.
Which is kind of crazy in the wedding industry. And, that's already on the books. We usually do half our business in the calendar year.
Right.
So I think we'll probably, last year we did something like 75. Well, I'm hoping to break 100 this year.
It's so cool.
So it just allowed us to scale up.
Do you think that you would have found, because it's clear that you've found your strengths, whether it's the property management side of it, but really I think it's more of the event planning, and I know that your business has kind of those two categories, like the day of stuff, and then the I'll call it venue. Yeah, venue management. Or consulting. Yeah. It's obvious that, like, there's a strength there, that you've figured that out. Yeah. I'm curious, do you think that you would have been able to figure that out had you not tried all the other things first? Like, when you look back, I was always meant to be a... So we get so mad because we're sitting around with, like, we have Gen Z's siblings who are really trying to figure out what they're doing. And I attend a co-op with my children that has high schoolers that are, like, talking about, their options. It drives us crazy when people think that you have to do one thing. I'm like, I've done 100 things in the past 10 years, and I don't think everyone has to. Almost literally 100 things you've done. It's so frustrating to me because I love what I do right now. We have a 10-year contract. I don't anticipate not doing it anytime soon. I have lots of ideas. I have, like, a lot of what's next. But there's no way I could have manufactured that at age 20. But I think... Here's the things I would do, and this is what I always tell my siblings, is, like, take the next best step, and don't worry about if it's for the next 10 years. If someone offers you a job in Costa Rica to go coach at a surf camp, go do that. Like, you don't know if you're going to meet someone. You don't know if you're going to read a book while you're there. You don't know if you're, you learn a skill set. You don't know if, like, some emergency is going to change everything. Like, there's no way to know. And so I would say take the next best step. I would say read a lot. I would say meet a lot of people. And I think what I really learned with the lodge, and actually every single relationship since then, is if you can give, like, 100% wherever you're at, it just opens so many doors. Yeah. I keep coming back to that now, but... because do you think part of what's helped you is that you've had... Well, have you always had that mindset, or have you learned it? That sort of, like... one step at a time mentality, like, because it almost seems to me, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but it almost seems to me like you've been able to try these things or take this risk or start that business or whatever, almost with a, like, if it doesn't work, that's okay. And I don't mean to, like, downplay it, but almost that it's like I hold it very loosely. I still do on my business. Like, this could change tomorrow. That it's not, if this fails, my life's over thing. Do you think that has contributed to the success of it long term and helped you have the ability to execute? I think that I've always had the doing whatever I'm doing really well. And it's because I was raised with a Christian worldview, and that's biblical. And so... it's part of my faith journey to show up and do whatever I'm doing very well. And because of that,
have a marketing agency and I get 20 clients and those people have now become connections in my current business, or I'm showing up 100% at a digital marketing agency in a job I don't really like, and then that person refers me to the personal assistant job, which is like basically carried us through that whole season of not making any money. I mean, she was paying me very well. I forgot I worked at a doctor's office in there, which is a whole different thing, and got pregnant again. So I think I've always had that. I think that the do the next best thing has come with all the like hard things in that.
It's been forced. It's been learned.
It's enforced. Yeah, I don't think. I probably may have come with age. You know, it might have just come with age where you're like, get old enough, you're like, I can't actually control my life. But I think we had so many different scenarios where, you know, you have a miscarriage or you get evacuated from your house or your pastor decides to move, and like I didn't have control over any of that. And so like really you have to take the next best step. I'm like, what do you do when you lose your job?
Yeah, I was going to say,
the next thing in front of you.
It's almost that like you've almost had enough resets.
Yeah, like, I feel like I've reset every 2 years of my life. We're actually on, Nate and I talk about all the time, we're like, something's going to happen soon. You know, like our whole married life has been resetting.
Like, when's the next foot going to drop?
Yeah, you know, which isn't healthy. There's definitely some trauma there. Yeah. You know, like we definitely need to go to counseling. But I just, it really gives us a lot of pain to watch 20-somethings say, I'm at this HR job that I really don't like. And I'm not making what I want to make, and it's hard to pay my mortgage. And instead of saying I'm going to do really well where I'm here, and I'm going to meet as many people, I'm going to read as many books, and I'm going to take some side hustles and do those things, instead they're sitting around like, you know, let's think of the 20 to, you know, where do I want to spend the rest of my life? Do I need to go back to school? It always turns into this really big like, I need to make a huge life change, when actually you could just take the next best stuff and that'll probably change your life.
Well, and it's almost too like, so my dad always says that I've never met a strong person with an easy past.
Yeah.
And, when I'm running ultras even, it's like, okay, the only thing I know for sure is that this is going to hurt, you know, that there's going to be a problem that has to get solved.
The second thing you know is it's going to end.
Right. But but if you have the mindset of like, I know inevitably there's going to be a challenge. Yeah. The fact that you've had kind of these like reset moments, it almost, I think, can provide kind of a freeing perspective of like, so what? Like, you know that you've been there before, that you can overcome the proverbial rock bottom or like the reset or whatever, the business not working out the way you did or thought, or getting fired from the job. I mean, gosh, how many jobs have you been fired for? And we're saying that joking. But like where I think so many people, what comes from that, I think, is freedom, actually. And here's why I think. Because I think so many people failure to execute because of fear. Because they don't know for sure that they could overcome the collapse or the reset. You know what I mean? Where you've had 4 or 5 of them.
Everything from like hurt relationships, shut down businesses, fired from jobs, health stuff, don't have a car. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, like don't have a house, get evacuated from your house.
Like, can figure it out.
It's temporal. But it also is, we tell our kids, you'll ask them, they'll go, oh, this is so hard. I'm like, and we go, what do we do say? And they always go, in our family, we do hard things. This is another thing that we've had pushback from family members and saying like, our family really believes in like saying true things. It's also biblical, like what you should say true and beautiful and good things and not evil or dark or bad things, because those things can come, there's power in your words, I guess is the best way to say it. So my parents or family are always like, don't say like you do hard things. You're like calling hard in. And my big thing is hard's going to come. I'd rather really teach my kids that like we do hard things. Yeah. It doesn't matter if we're like on a hike. It's like we do. I don't care if it's like going to work out at the gym. That is hard. Right. It's like really hard to do. Or parenting, that's hard. Running a business is hard. Like, you're sitting here doing your math homework. That is hard.
Yep.
And we do
hard things. I love that.
Like that is hard.
We're so similar. And
it's cool to watch because your kids can watch you and you're sitting there doing your workout, or you're sitting there. I mean, like the other night, why'd you stay up all late? Oh yeah, I had to do a whole bunch of math and numbers, and I had to make a P&L, and it was really hard.
Right.
Like that.
But we do hard things.
We do hard things.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and it almost normalizes that. Like, well, what it does is builds confidence. and normalizes it. Well, you mentioned it earlier even, but like the pick your heart,
Yeah.
But I love that mentality that you're able to instill in the kids, because I think the world needs more people that know they're capable of doing hard things.
For sure. And like, just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Right.
And that's what I try to explain to people all the time. I'm not saying I actually think I don't know, I shouldn't say this, but there's very small chance my kid's life will be, like, first 20 years will be as hard as my first 20 years.
Right.
Like, I hate saying that, but, like, I really hope that for them. But also, like, there's a lot of things that are good that are hard, just normal. Like I said, working out, eating good food.
Doing the thing, yeah.
Doing the thing, parenting.
Doing our dishes.
All those things, doing our dishes.
Wiping off
There's
the table.
a lot of things that are just, like, hard to do. Like,
Finding our
just
socks.
because something's hard doesn't mean we avoid it.
Right.
And I just think that is really important. And I think, that's a good transition. So my business is now, we actually manage venues, but we also, we were doing wedding planning. And this is what I meant by reading books that apply to your situation, because I always heard people niche down, get really specific about your audience. And I think when you're first starting, that's dumb advice, because you're doing market research. Like, how would you know where to niche? I could have said, we're only going to do weddings in this area, or I could have said we're only going to do weddings in this budget, or I could have said we're only going to do weddings in this style. Those are things that wedding planners do. What we decided to do, and there's no way I would have known this before, but how we decided to get specific is we cut out planning and we only do day of coordination. And no one does that. Every other wedding planner, I actually saw this, some Nebraska wedding coordinator agency, and I was like, you can do that? Oh my gosh, you can do that? I'm doing that. And I just decided overnight we're going to be a day of coordination agency. And starting last season, we stopped taking planning clients. They were taking about 40% of our time and energy and work, but only making us about 20% of our money. So my theory was, if we take that 40% of the work, put it towards this other stuff, we probably could make about the same much money,
right,
with a lot less effort. And it works really a lot better with our lifestyle that we want, because we now don't have clients calling us on Christmas Day because we're not their wedding planner. We're just doing their day of coordination. And I could explain that, but it's very industry specific. I don't know, there's no way I would have known to get more specific that way.
Right.
Without trying, like, market research. And so that would be my advice. If you're being an entrepreneur, people are like, get specific. I think that might work, like, in a branding perspective, but I think in general, take all the business you can. And then after you get, like, you're probably at the point too where you're like, okay, now we don't have to say yes to the 1-minute videos. We only do 3-minute videos, or whatever that looks like, because I didn't even have enough data to know, like, how much time does this.
And those early days,
I'm like, it doesn't.
You got $50.
Like, what? So that's what I meant. But I think I got so bogged down in all this advice. It was actually for where I'm at now, and not where I was at 5 years ago.
Right.
And so now I'm like, oh yeah, all that advice I read 5 years ago makes so much sense now, because we are, and that's what I mean by maintenance mode. For the first time, I don't have a huge project on the horizon. I don't have to build packages. I don't have to build pricing. I don't have to do it. I do have to hire, but I have training manuals now. I don't have to, we're building an office, but that's like, my husband's always building something, so that's not a problem. I'm not building a website. I'm like, for the first time, I'm like, I don't have to do anything. People just find our website, they book us. I have a coordinator. I assign them a coordinator. They actually assign themselves. It's all automated now. And then they go coordinate their weddings, and then we get a good review, and then we move on, do the next one.
Do you think you'll get to a point, or maybe you are, where, like, you're satisfied? Like, the being in that, does that feel kind of nice in that maintenance mode? Or can you sense that there'll be another thing, or another growth, or
there's definitely another thing. One, because we're almost done with this house project, and Nate will have time, and I think he wants to do something. So there's definitely something else. Two, I'm kind of torn between, do I add an adjacent? I will definitely have another business. We, I think, are to the point where we could probably scale up, add some coordinators, take some more weddings. I don't really, for my lifestyle, want to add different locations. I don't really want to add, like, a lot of people do wedding vendor consulting. I don't really want to get into other people's businesses. I could see us adding an adjacent business, whether it's DJ or flowers or rentals,
right?
Where we could sell to the same clients or manage more venues, like
right.
Scaling that way. But I also could just as easily, and this is what we're weighing now, does it make more sense to add an adjacent business, or does it make more sense to just go out a different business?
A whole different business, yeah.
Because we're getting to the point, and it's really exciting, where I could at any time pay someone to run my business. It's all systematized enough that I could find Rose, who's my been my employee for 6 years. If she's, her kids will go to school in 3 or 4 years. Do you want to run this whole thing? Or I could hire someone to do my job, or I could probably get away with, like, right now I'm probably putting in 10, 15 hours a week. So, like, definitely there's something next, and we're trying to decide, do we, like, leave it and put a bow on that and just let it makes us a lot of money every year, makes us a lot of money every year. I don't need to put that number out there. And then go do something else, or do we, like, add on this way?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really cool season. Right now, our business pays myself and Nate a salary, but he's building our house. Not really. I mean, he does work in the business. He does do stuff. But one of the cool ideas is that he could start his own thing or go do, go get a job. That's one of his ideas. I dismiss that idea, but, and that could replace his income in our business, and I could take that income and either hire someone or hire an office manager,
right,
or hire more coordinators, or whatever that looks like for next. So we'll hopefully have a little bit of investment capital.
Have all the options.
Yeah. So we're definitely in this, like, what's next. But I'm also really hyper fixated on this idea right now that, like, so my oldest son's 6 and my youngest is 4. And so I have, like, 8 years till Blakely's 12. Like, there's, like, really only 8 years. And so I'm kind of hyper fixated on this idea. It's hard for me because I like to work. Like, what would it look like to do that 20 hours a week and, like, just put a pause on it for a second, and, like, maybe we go start something else or whatever, but, like, I guess I've been hyper fixated on this idea of, like, I have so many years left, but, like, for the next 8,
be with family.
Like, and I don't want to spend every single day with my kids, but, like, what would it look like to try to be, like, way more intentional that way, in that direction of our life for the next 8 years, instead of taking on another huge project?
Right.
Because at this point, we built this giant barn house. We've, like, we just had really big we built a business. We've just had these really big projects that take so much time for the first 4 and 6 years of my kid's life. And so both Nate and I are like, maybe we don't take a big project for, like, the next couple of years. Right. And that's not forever. We love big projects, but, like,
when someone calls to you.
Yeah. Like, I'd rather maybe not go looking for that.
Right
now.
Take the next right step.
Which is hard, because I know what you're saying about, like, wanting the next big thing. But I just keep, every time I start dreaming and thinking about it, I'm like, but, or I could just wait.
Or not.
Years, like, and we actually are doing well enough that maybe we could do that.
And what a great place to be in.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I will, like, so the other thing, like, tip, if you were, like, just getting started, is, like, the more hard things you do, actually, you said it provides freedom, but it also, like, teaches you, it really does teach you that you can do hard things. And I want to end on this story. So my parents, the same exact month that we got started at the lodge, so in 2021, they purchased this barn in Hermosa Valley. It was like a barn adjacent to an existing house, but the current owner had sold off the house, he had sold off property, and he just had the barn left. It had a beautiful yard and irrigation water, but it was a barn. It wasn't a barn for animals, but it was like a 2 bay cars, a giant, like, attic space, a RV slot, a tiny kitchenette, no oven or anything, and then a workshop. It's like it's literally a barn. My parents bought it with the idea off the market of turning it into, like, a 21-room or 21-person Airbnb. They're really needed in our market, and they just had the idea of, like, let's try to build, like, a big vacation rental. Literally 3 months in, this is, like, September. So in September, we're like, well, why don't we live in it? Because we're renting our house. Let's make some cash. We'll rent our house, Airbnb, top and bottom, and we'll move into the barn. We'll pull our camper right in the RV spot, and we'll live in our camper. So dumb. I don't know what we were thinking. We had a 3 and a 1-year-old. It was so dumb. When, like, people ask us if we regret it, 100% yes. Would not do it again. Will it pay off? Yes. Do I regret it? Yes. Which we can get to that. But we pull our RV in, we live in this barn, and 3 months in, and this was supposed to be temporary. My parents bought it. They're going to renovate it. We're like, let's just make some cash. We'll live in it for the summer.
Yeah.
There's only an outside bathroom, and it's finished, but it's outside, so you have to go outside to the shower. And I guess December, my dad's like, we're going to sell it. We'll all sell it to you for what we bought it for. And we're like, okay, yeah, maybe we should do it. I don't know why. He decides it's too big of a project for him. And I don't know why, because we have less time and way less money than my retired parents or almost retired parents. And we're like, oh, yeah, we'll buy it. So we bought it from my parents. And, we're doing things here and there, and we're not sure what we're going to do with it. And, like, 3 or 4 months in, and this is why I say we do regret it, we were like, it's so dumb of us to not finish this and then sell it. We were like, we could sell it. And we got to this point where we're like, we don't want to do this big of a project when our kids are this little. But we're holding that with, this is so dumb to not sell it now. We're like, wait, we're going to make like quadruple our money if we finish this barn into a house. So that's stupid to not do that. It's a great opportunity. But also, like, we don't really want to do this. At the same time, we got really convicted to get completely out of debt. And so we sold our rental house. We sold our camper. We paid off $30,000 worth of credit card debt. We paid off our cars. So we got, like, really motivated. And we're sitting here going, like, do we just go all the way and sell this barn? And we're like, this would be so dumb. And also, where would we move? Like, there's nowhere to live here. And we just signed this 10-year contract with a venue and this awesome opportunity here for work. So we stuck with it, and that was in 2020, beginning of 2022, and we just, like, it's not even finished because I was painting this week, but we, like, just moved in, like, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
No way.
So it's, like, the longest, hardest, most taxing project I can ever put words to. We, like, we're living in it this whole time. So we're, like, living in this barn. We have to, and Nate does 100% of the work. So he did 100% of the framing. He rips out all the old furniture, insulation, etc. We had to build plans, and then we had preliminary plumbing done. He has to run a new water line, and he, like, literally physically, one person does all this job. And then, and anytime we actually hired one single thing out, it's so big. It's like 4,500 square feet. It's this huge building. And every time we'd have, like, the plumbers come, they'd bring, like, 20 people and be there for a month. And Nate's like, this is why this is so frustrating, because I'm one person. And, like, they're bringing 20 people, and they're here for, like, a whole month doing the plumbing for this building. It has 5 bathrooms and, like, 6 bedrooms. It has an apartment and an office and a workshop. And
are you going to live there, or is it going to be an Airbnb?
We're going to live there.
Are you?
Yeah. So somewhere along the way, we were going to buy it and turn it into Airbnb, and my dad kept going, this is going to be the perfect family house. You should turn it into a family house. The first year we, like, lived there, we're like, no, we're not going to turn it. We're going to just flip this. And, you know, I don't know, he was right. So we were like, oh, yeah, it actually would be a really nice family house. So we switched somewhere along the way. We had, like, the preliminary plumbing done, and then the county said we had to go back and get all permits. So at that point, that put us back a year. We had to get an architect and an engineer and draw up plans and the whole thing. And again, you're living there. We don't have an oven. We didn't have an oven for 3 years. We had an outdoor bathroom for 3 years. My kids slept in the same room as us for 3 years.
And that's the stuff that people don't see.
Yeah, no one would ever know. You wouldn't know that. I got off my personal Instagram when I quit marketing. I was like, screw Instagram.
Because, like, and I don't know, but the whole thing about, like, doing hard things.
We would, like, show up to your kid's birthday party. You don't know that we're, like, living in a one-bedroom barn with an outdoor bathroom.
But people only see the end result.
For sure. We're going to now have parties all the time. And people are going to come like, wow, this house is so nice.
Must be nice. Yeah.
With my really nice, beautiful marble counters. That, like, you know. So
but they didn't see the years and years of living in a, in a fifth wheel, there's, like, and showering outside.
Actually, we are at the point, like, literally recently, we've been like, we should have shown more people.
Yeah.
You know, like, man, we really should have shown
seen more of the process.
Like, we should have had you over for dinner, and so you could, like, see, like, oh my gosh, this literally used to be, like, an empty barn.
Then you can see the before and after.
But I think, so the reason I say we regret it is I would not, if I could do it again, I would not take on that big of a project when my kids are so little.
Right.
It took a lot of time, and it just put a lot of stress on our marriage, and a lot of, like, so much physical stress and health stress that, like, we weren't able to be good parents or good husband and wife, you know, just because we were, like, in it.
Too many things in the air.
Yeah, and because Nate was building 24/7 for 4 years, I was running the business by myself. I'm, like, mostly parenting. He's the most involved dad ever, but like, I'm carrying the weight of the homeschooling thing. I'm carrying the weight of most of their stuff,
right?
And families and all the things, and so it just was really hard, and I probably wouldn't have done it.
How nice!
Of course, now we live in a
I was gonna say,
house.
And now there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now we're like, oh my gosh, it's, like, almost summer again, and we get to, like, I get to be there with my garden.
And now what a great time for this new chapter.
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why we're like, maybe we don't need a
wait and
project,
see. Yeah.
Because we, but it does make you think, like, you can pretty much do everything. I think that is Elise Myers on Instagram who has that audio that's like, I have this thing that I just think nothing can be too hard.
Right.
Like, that's me. I'm like, yeah, I can do my own taxes for my 3 businesses.
Yeah.
Bring it on,
Yeah, I got
like,
this.
I can do that,
Right.
So, remodel a 4,500 square foot building, 30 weddings in 3 months. Yeah, let's do it.
Because we do hard things.
Yeah, we do hard things. So, That's
Love it. I love
we
it.
should probably go to therapy about that.
Yeah. Amber,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, it was so
has
good.
been an absolute blast. And yeah, thank you for.
I know we say it all the time, but we'll get the kids together.
Right, one of these. Should do hard things with them. No,
Yeah.
but no, seriously, this has been a ton of fun, and it's great to get some insight into what's possible, all the hats that you wear, all the balls that you keep in the air. I'm also really excited for you to have maybe the the maintenance mode
You
for
know
a minute.
what? You're
wouldn't
gonna
be a
call
bad
me
thing.
in a couple weeks, and it's gonna be like, guess what new
That'll be
project
something.
we
I
got?
know. But it'll be the right one at the right time.
Yeah, that's what we're
and,
hoping. Praying for.
Yeah, get to enjoy the chapter because it's for sure been earned. And I think that's what I want to thank you most for. It's like sharing those parts of the story that others don't see.
Yeah.
You know, the hard times, the resets, the losses, the rebuilds,
Yeah.
the resiliency, I mean, all that good stuff. It's just amazing. So the most
Fun.
important part, I told you this earlier.
A shirt. That's what I've been waiting for. That's the only reason I came.
Because you really are inspiring by example.
Thank
and
you.
so keep living the life you're living. It's so fun to see the positivity and the momentum and the excitement and all the building you're doing and anyway, all that stuff. So anyway, Amber, thank you so much.
Yes.
I've loved every
You're
second
welcome.
of it. I appreciate it.